All right. All right. So I wanted to do a special bootcamp about trading pieces, and this is probably something you're gonna find useful. And so how do you understand yourself? How do you trade pieces, right? Because you're offered a trade, and I imagine many people are trading as many as they can. They see an open file. It means we have to trade pieces. There's, let's say, open D file. Everything must go D file. Or I can trade the bishop for the knight. I'm trading it, and actually, it is funny. There is a rule in Russian school, as far as I know. The more you trade, the less you blunder. All right. So the idea is there, but I'm gonna mention this. The more you trade, the less you blunder slightly later about the simplification. Yep, yep. The first bootcamps, all of them are available there. Yeah, I got a little something there. All right, should be good. And about the first topic I want to mention is when do you trade? When do you trade? So the first rule when do you trade is when you are experiencing, when you have material advantage. So I'll start with one example. There's obviously more examples than this. I'll show you every single game for every rule. And after that, I'll show some very high level games and explain the process, why they are trading pieces, why they are declining pieces. It's not random. There's always a reason. Gaining a tempo, starting an attack, removing a defender, simplifying the position, transposing to an endgame. There's so many reasons why people trade, but it's never tossing a coin. There's always a reason. So when you're trading, you should be thinking, am I gaining something from the trade? All right. Let me start with the first example. Two examples, actually. Let me start with a simple one. How do you game tempo? This was my game against a Latvian chess legend, Edvins Kengis. We played it 2 years ago. It doesn't matter. I mean, he is already quit competitive chess, so he's not at his peak, while I was probably. And he misplayed the opening, and at some moment, oh, just a second, you didn't have to see that. At some moment, he misplayed the position. So here again, the reason why black doesn't take on f3 is this bishop is normally a stronger piece than a knight. And if he's going to take on f3, it opens this bishop and nobody is challenging it. So the knight is attacking on d4, but he played bishop g4 for the reason to provoke white to play h3 so that he can use it as a tempo, to play queen d7 and attack with the tempo. So that was his idea. This is why he played bishop g4 first. Playing bishop g4, h3, bishop f5, and now he can play queen d7 with the tempo. After bishop b2, here g4, b5, knight e4, I manage to win some material. I mean, all of this maybe is not so relevant. So I want to start to show the position here. So for example, we have this position. White is up some material. Yeah, bishop h5 is also possible. And if I'm having this position, yeah, white plays rook f to d1 first. But again, when I'm having this position, instead of grabbing every single pawn or material I can, I'm thinking how to not forget playing normal chess first. Yeah, Lali exactly says knight b6. I'm sorry, rook d1 definitely first, attacking the knight. The pawn on g7 is under attack. Knight b6. I'm happy to trade. Bishop b6. Bishop takes on g7. Rook e8. And here starts a simplification process. So white is up 2 pawns. And when you're having such an advantage in the game, it should be quite apparent that 2 pawns should be more than enough to win the game. So instead of hunting for the third pawn, for example, on b7, instead of focusing on playing for the checkmate, for example, somebody might think I should be able to checkmate black here because this king is so much exposed. I think the best chance here is simplify the position. Yeah, bishop d4 drops the pawn on b5. So I think the first move is quite easy, actually. Now, first we exclude from the game the knight on a5. We protect the pawn on b5, but this allows rook e2, and that was black's best chance to play rook e2. Yep, he has it. This is a part of the simplification. We are dropping the pawn on c2 so that in order we can simplify the position. We sack one pawn but make our life much more easier. So what happened in the game? Bishop d4. He cannot take because after knight takes on d4, the rook will be kicked out of the second rank. After rook takes on c2, there's a very nice intermezzo move, knight e3. Yep, exactly, the pawn on b7 will be target. Knight e3. Captures. Captures. The only move is rook c3. And again, we simplify the position. Couple of pieces less things to worry about. Take the second pawn, rook b8, and all we need to do here is not to blunder anything. So the pawn on h3 is under attack, bishop g2, knight e5, and even here at this moment, we are not forgetting that we need to play normal chess at all. I know some people cannot stop at this moment because they want a pawn, they want a second pawn, and they see there's this third pawn on a7, so yeah, it's very tempting to go after this. You just have to remember the normal rules of chess. They still exist. They're still here. Yeah, this is definitely a winning position. So after rook e1, f6, f4, the game continues, bring the king into game, and black managed to win this. So if I could compare this position, and this is very easy, very simple setup. So instead of this, we could be going for a slightly more greedy approach. For example, let's say instead of the rook d1 playing good chess at the same time, I see immediately the second pawn on g7. So let's say I'm taking it. Bishop takes on g7 just because I saw it. By the way, there's bishop takes on b5. Yeah, bishop takes on b5. I'm taking on a fate. Something like knight takes on a fate. Knight, I don't know where it goes. Knight c3. Bishop takes. Bishop f6. Knight c4. I mean, this game is not over. This game is still continuing. And this is why it's a very... he can take it from me. Probably he can. I'm just showing a sample line that even when you're enjoying material advantage, it's a great idea not to forget about normal chess moves as well. So there's another example. Okay, this one maybe was slightly complicated. Let me show you another one. Incidentally, it's against the same opponent. I didn't really prepare this to be like this. It just happened. So we played another game. I won't mention what happened in the opening phase. It's not really that important. I completely outplayed my opponent, got a huge advantage, and he blundered the exchange. Yeah, here he blundered the exchange. So knight a7, rook c4, takes, and takes. Now, yeah, converting advantage. Converting advantage is a big topic, and I had a separate topic as a bootcamp, but it involves also trading the pieces. And again here, obviously, when we are having this position, we are thinking, how I can trade pieces, how I can trade off some pieces. And I'm looking at this position. Why I'm thinking about trading the pieces? Because I have the extra exchange for a pawn. But many people very often overestimate the importance of the exchange for a pawn. I tend to treat it's a half a pawn. Maybe slightly more, maybe an extra pawn, but to be honest, it feels like less. It's about half a pawn. And it's not like you can forget about every single existing rule just to try to simplify the position, because normal chess rules still apply here as well. So obviously rook c1. Yeah, rook c1, it feels that it has to be played. But what about the pawn on a2? Are you not concerned about it? So if you're going to play something like rook c1, what about a3? And this pawn on a2, it feels to be under some serious pressure, might be unnecessary counterplay. And what I've learned in my career so far is when you're having an excellent position, yes, you're patient first. You're patient. You play a3. Knight f6, he's seeking a counterplay. No, just first, let's start trading the rooks. Let's start trading the rooks. Rook c1, we are trading the rooks. Obviously, black is thinking about how to complicate this, but giving it away, rook d8, this is just a free line. Even bishop b6, bishop b5 probably already wins something, so black has no choice. So he plays d5. We are happily trading, taking the c file under the control, queen d7. Why trade? Because we're simplifying. Again, remember this rule is that when you're enjoying material advantage, try to make as many piece trades as possible. It's still according to Mark Dvoretsky, the world-known endgame specialist who wrote Mark Dvoretsky's Endgame Manual, and he said in a book, it's one of the most important rules is when you are the stronger side, let's say you're having a material advantage, you are trading pieces. You're trading pieces. And the weaker side, here's the weaker side. Black is the weaker side. He's trading the pawns. So again, if you are the stronger side, obviously you're not interested to trade too many pawns than necessary. Yeah, all right. So d5 was played, queen d7 takes. Obviously, black is not in the rush trading the queen. And now there's a very interesting moment. What do you do here? What do you do here? Just a second. So we are trying to simplify the position. Yeah, rook d1, but where's the difference? Rook d1, rook c1, where does this rook belong? Bishop c4, definitely interesting. Yeah, but now the question is, do you want to trade on d5? Are you playing bishop c4 to take on d5? Because this is what you have to understand. Again, don't have the illusions that your opponent is going to take on e3. He's not going to take on e3. He's not going to make it simpler for you. Rook c5, I see how is that any different. Bishop c4, you are not ready to take it because, again, don't overestimate the importance of the extra exchange for the pawn. It's just half a pawn. It's just half a pawn. It's nothing almost. I mean, okay, it's very pleasant to have it, and nobody is arguing that white has a very good position, but the game is still continuing. I know I've seen many people play like this. They see extra exchange, okay, game is over. They try to trade everything, bam, 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 and then at some moment they realize, oh, okay, I cannot win the game because he was breaking a lot of rules before. So nothing changes. We are still having the strong bishop. The strong bishop, if we want to trade, we are going to find the right time to trade it. So here first I played bishop f2, h6, and bishop f1. You might ask, I mean, why? Why these moves? I just move the bishops away so that I'm not blundering any knight f4 ideas. I'm not trading the bishop for the knight. I'm seeking a way how to trade queens. I'm seeking a way how to trade the light square bishops. And at the same time, maybe I can eye for this weakness on a4. This game is still continuing. We just have to be patient. Yeah, longer range bishops, exactly. So he played knight f6. Rook e1, we can pressure the pawn on e5. We can pressure it. Pressure, easy pressure, pressure. And finally, at some moment, black already is losing some material. So let me fast forward what happened there. So I snatched the pawn. Rook e1, a very accurate move to stop any e4 from happening. Queen c7, take, e4. Yeah, obviously black is already desperate. And you have to feel this moment when your opponent is desperate. He is moving forward. And this is the moment, for example, when I see that my opponent is charging forward, everything he has got. He's trying some tricks. You have to remember, this is the moment when the game is decided. Right now. Right? And you need to be extra careful not to miss anything, not to miss your opponent's ideas. And I could take on e4. There's knight c3 idea. So my opponent is trying to rely on tricks. So knight c3, rook c1, knight e2 idea. Yeah, feels dangerous. Exactly, feels dangerous. Although the engine says it's good. Yeah, it's good. F takes e4, chill. Totally, everything's good. I don't know about that. There's, by the way, after f takes, knight g4, bishop g3, queen b6 ideas. So what I'm saying here, try to keep things simple. And this is also one of those important rules. Now I'm talking about converting material advantage, but when you're having this material advantage, you're thinking about training as many pieces, and when it comes down to more complications, you want to avoid them. Queen c2. Queen c2 could be some knight c3. I don't know. Queen c2 actually is possible. Probably. Looks good. Yeah, looks good. I played the simple move, bishop d1, not to blunder anything. Closer to the king, the bishop on a4 is no longer under attack with knight c3, but I just want to show so that I'm talking about trading the pieces. Bishop d4, simplify, simplify. And what do you do here? Now, what do you do here? Don't take? Don't take where? Yep. Bishop f6 and queen d8. That is the simplification. That is the simplification. So takes, check, 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 here. Okay, I mean, you can take on f3 if you want. That's good. But, I mean, the a pawn is going to decide the game. Yeah, so probably simple g takes is the safe move. G takes, just push the pawn, extra exchange. Now this is completely winning position because you managed to trade as many pieces as you can since the start of achieving this material advantage, but you were being patient. You were still following the other rules. So again, if you got something like an extra exchange, it doesn't mean like you have to trade as many pieces immediately, completely ignoring the other rules. So this is rule number one. Right. Eliminating a critical defender is rule number two. When you're attacking your opponent, very often one of the rules how to properly trade pieces is you remove a very important defender. Can you exchange sack? Depends really. If you're in time to sacrifice on e6, for example, let's say we would have this position. Let's say we have the rook on e8 and it is white to move. Are you going to sacrifice on e6 and push the pawn? Because it's outside passed pawn. So we have the rook on e8. We can now sacrifice on e6. Are you going to do it? No. No, you're not going to do it. Unless you very quickly calculate that you're promoting the queen. You're not going to do it because that is a very bad idea. That is a very bad idea in terms of if you miscalculate, you're just playing an equal endgame. You are playing without any risk here. There's no risk. You can always sacrifice the exchange. You can just push forward the queenside pawns. Yeah, don't make these funny tricks possible just because you think it's an interesting and great idea. But sometimes just keeping things simpler is a better option. Right. About the exchanging a critical defender, I have a very nice game. I wanted to show you. Just a second, I'll find it. It was somewhere here. Okay, here it is. Yeah, you position simply the rook on the dark squares. By the way, for example, when I'm having this endgame, I'm playing in time trouble. I'm just positioning the rook and the king on the dark squares. That's it. I'll never blunder anything. So that's again one of the little tricks, especially when you're playing in time trouble. Just position your pieces on the other square than your opponent's bishop is. Right. Okay, I'll start with the next example. Hey, Castor, congratulations with a good tournament. Fast forwarding the game, maybe I should start it with here. Start it with here. Hey, Simon. The bootcamp, I don't know, it depends really. I have some examples I would like to show you. Usually something like 2 hours. Yeah, usually something like that. Yeah, so this is my game against the Finnish FIDE master Kyutto Roppe. We played it something like, I don't remember, 5 years ago maybe, 4 years ago, in the Finnish league. And it starts with a tactical idea. So, for example, here we are seeing the idea of knight f6 or bishop g5. So, in order to accelerate the attack, do you see which is one of the critical pieces which holds together black's position? There's one piece which holds together black's position. And again, when we're thinking about trading the pieces, we're thinking, how can we trade the king? The king. Yeah, the guy on e7, the bishop on e7, obviously. So, yeah, Lally, of course, he sees it. So I'm thinking about some bishop g5 ideas, right? To eliminate the bishop so that I can play queen c1, queen g5, queen f6, and mate. Yeah, that's ideally our best scenario. But immediately bishop g5, there's the pawn on e5 hanging. But this, again, it doesn't mean that you have to discard this idea. It means this idea is going to be there. Okay. So the other problem, after any bishop g5, there's going to be knight e5 idea. So it's very difficult to prepare it. Queen d2, still bishop g5 is going to be... Is there? No, there's no knight e5. But after something like queen d2, I could play rook e8, bishop g5, and bishop f8. Keep the bishop on f8. So it's not really that simple. Here's a slightly more difficult move. So I start with c4. c4 is a very traditional idea in the closed French. This is closed French. The idea is just snatch the pawn on a4, just in case. And after d takes, bishop c4 loses the queen c1. But the trick here is after knight b6. So knight b6 is the obvious choice. Now we can trade off this annoying bishop. So instead of the very tempting bishop g5, which is still good, there's something better. Can you see it? How is your tactics? Yeah, bishop g5 is the obvious choice. That's the obvious choice, and normally that would be probably a good trade. But still, you need to understand what's going to happen, for example, after rook d8. What's going to happen after knight takes on c4. Knight f6 and king h8. So, because bishop f6, e takes, I don't think black is in the mood to trade the dark square bishop. We are trading. Are you trading? The idea is correct. The idea is correct. It starts with knight f6. Knight f6, king h8, knight g5. It's also good. It's also good. Maybe there's already more than one combination, but again, we're thinking about how to trade this bishop. And if I'm thinking how to trade it, I would love to do it knight for bishop, because we still have this very powerful dark square bishop. So you're thinking about, I'm playing bishop g5, I'm trading those bishops, but we are also trading a very good piece ourselves. And there's a number of good moves here, but I was expecting knight f6 here and knight d5. It's slightly complicated, but the idea is to push d6. After takes, d5, d6, we manage to win the bishop. And if there's going to be rook d8 at some point, I can always play queen c1. For example, e takes, c takes, rook d8, d6, queen goes away. I just play queen c1, attacking the rook, then I just take, and this bishop is going to completely dominate the position. So what he did, he played queen d8. Now I managed to eliminate this dark square bishop. Since black is risking to get mated, he needs to trade queens. Intermezzo check. Takes. Hello, Celtic. Bishop takes on c4, and it seems that black has survived this, but this actually turns into a little puzzle that I managed to solve myself during my puzzle solving. A typical motive, yeah, sure, but this is a tactical trick with the idea to trade one of the defending pieces, which is holding together black's kingside. Yeah. So bishop g5, bishop f6, check, boom, boom, king g2, and mate is inevitable. And this is how the game finished. Check, check, mate. This is my game. It's funny. During a live stream, I once solved it. That was quite nice memories from this game. But again, it all started by understanding which pieces to trade. So the bishop on e7 is an important piece, and we want to trade it. Yeah, that was very, very straightforward. Right. So that was the rule number 2. Eliminating critical defender when attacking, and the bishop on e7 was the critical defender. Now the next rule, when we are normally trading the pieces, and where we are not trading the pieces, it's the space advantage. Space advantage, why it's an important piece? Because the bishop on e7 holds the f6 and g5 square, and without it, there would be various mating ideas. So, for example, if we remove the bishops, okay, let's say we removed even the bishops. I can play queen c1, queen g5, trade the knights on f6, and just checkmate on g7. At least I can try to do that. Or at least get an excellent endgame with a knight on f6 or knight on g5. The pawn on h7 is very weak. Yeah, the black squares are super, super weak. And of course, when I started to play this, I didn't expect there's going to be a beautiful mate in the end. It just turned it out. I started by eliminating one of the crucial defenders, which is the bishop on e7. So the next topic, the next side topic, subtopic, so to speak, is space advantage. You're welcome. The space advantage, I wanted to show you this game by Tigran Petrosyan, the former world champion. Thank you, Moki. Tigran Petrosyan played this game in 1974 against Onto Venäläinen from Finland, I presume. Needs Olympiad. And this is the Morozzi bind. Queen a5. Now let's talk a little about the trading rules when you have a space advantage. So what do you think? What kind of rules could apply? What's a space advantage, right? I mean, I have more space. It means my pieces and my pawns, let's say they control the first 5 lines up to the 5th rank. Everything is under my control. And the opponent is controlling the last 3. So for example, a classical Sicilian hedgehog might be an example. King's Indian is a classical example. Very good, Urukai. No trading, but it's going to be slightly more tricky than this. But the general rule, indeed, is when you're enjoying a space advantage with, for example, white or black, it can also be with black. It doesn't have to be with white. You have more space advantage. You don't want to trade. Why is that? Because we're looking at this position, let's say, from the black's perspective. Now, black, all of his pieces are positioned on the last, essentially, 3 ranks. Okay, queen on a5 doesn't really matter. The queen on a5 is, it can be pushed away if we want to, but black's pieces, they're lacking the so-called, in Russian it sounds slightly better, oxygen. They don't have an oxygen. They don't have a space. They don't have a space where to stretch legs. And yeah, with space you can maneuver a lot of pieces. Without the space, you cannot really do it. Thus, the rule is this. If you have a space advantage, you want to have as many pieces as you can so that you can maneuver there, so that you can continue increasing pressure and creating threats. And from the opposite direction, if you are in a very cramped position, you want to trade off the pieces. So there you go. I'm seeing this position. This is what Petrosian played. And yeah, without the pieces, there is no point of having space. That's very nicely you put there. So Petrosian perfectly understood this. So he's playing with white. Instead of thinking, can I play on knight takes on c6, which would be a terrible choice, horse b3, yeah. Because knight c6 is a bad choice. First, we break the rule about the space advantage. We allow black to trade off a couple of pieces. And other thing is, after b takes on c6, we lose control of the d5 square. So how is that a good choice? Immediately, I want to mention one very important thing. Don't please take this rule for granted. For every situation, there is always an exception. There's always, I mean, it doesn't work 100%. It means you know in which direction to look. So you recognize the space advantage. It means probably it's a great idea not to trade pieces, or vice versa. For example, you are getting cramped. Probably it's a great idea to trade it. But there are other factors as well, other rules. For example, should I trade off a good piece against a bad piece? For example, the bishop on g7 is a good piece. Now, should I want to trade it for the bishop on e3? It weakens the king. It's not so easy. It's not so simple. Yeah, the engine's value is space advantage above all, definitely. So you know these rules, and they allow you to make this decision. So Petrosian played knight b3. Knight b3. So the question again here is, why black didn't take knight takes on d4 here? He should have. He should have traded knights. Knight takes on d4, bishop c6, maybe the other knight, knight e7. This would be a great idea. Still white is better because of the space advantage, but this would be easier. And Petrosian immediately spotted the idea that black missed this opportunity. After knight b3, queen d8, again, normal chess still continues. Although when I'm looking at this position, I'm thinking, maybe I could have pressed for some more space advantage with a move like g4. g4, g5, f4, although that's creating a lot of weaknesses in the position. So Petrosian played rook d1, b6, presumably afraid of the incoming c5 idea, which probably was Petrosian's idea. Rook c1, rook b8. And again, here is a great move, very much favored by very strong players. You always are patient. You are patient. You are not rushing forward. So, for example, here, instead of rushing forward to trade pieces, Petrosian is patient, makes king h1 a useful move. And after bishop e6, he doesn't mind to trade a couple of pieces because he gets a weakness on c6, which wasn't possible before. For example, bishop d5, c takes, there's a pawn on a6 as well. And probably we can just take it. We can just take it. And this wasn't possible with the pawn on b7 here. So that you don't confuse the position. After knight e5, knight e7, here Petrosian decided to change the character of the position. He could have pushed for the space advantage. He decided to switch to a kingside attack. So he played knight e4. I don't think that was the best choice here. Trades, a lot of trades. And this should normally be achievement for black. But Petrosian had a different idea. He was looking towards a kingside attack. Rook c3, f4, rook g3, f5, and used this opportunity that black can never really take on d5 because after c takes on d5, white can simply penetrate the c file and try to take the pawn on a6. So rook c3 was played, f4, and queen c5. Now there is one more final moment of this game. So what do you think what Petrosian did here? b4? Queen d2? Yeah, it's queen d2. Queen d2. We are playing for the mate. We're again, b4 would be not a good idea because we are breaking a couple of rules here. Queen c5, not queen c5, definitely. For example, very interesting moment here. Normally, we don't want to trade. Yeah, we don't want to trade the queens because we're looking towards the queenside attack and we're enjoying some space advantage. But again, I want to mention here a very important moment. There's always the exception. So, for example, black could have had the rook not on b8, but on a8. So, for example, the rook was not on b8, but on a8. Right here. Now, again, if you are blindly following the rule, oh, he's offering me the trade, I'm the one playing for the checkmate, I'm the one who's supposed to deliver this big idea at the kingside, you're going to miss it. You're going to miss it all the time. So the rule means it's showing you direction, showing you the ideas, what you have to think about. It's not a solution. So, for example, had the rook be on a8, then indeed you can break this rule just because there's an exception. There's a fork on c7. So here the fork on c7 doesn't do anything because queen c5, b takes, knight c7, the rook, rook c8. You don't want to get the knight on a6. It's lost. And on e6. Now this would be a terrible trade. Just a second. Trade. Knight c7. I know it's very tempting to give such forks. Knight e6. Let's say, there's rook b2. Okay, let's ignore rook b2 for the time being. Let's say f takes. How is this an achievement? Because we traded off a lot of pieces for unknown reasons. Why did we do it? Just because there's a fork, just because we can fork the rook and bishop. Weakness on a6, we cannot get there. And what we did, we allowed black knight eventually get to d4. So might be something like rook b6, knight b8, knight c6, knight d4. Yeah, you gave up the advantage. So this is very tempting. But why not take the pawn on a6? Because I think it's going to be lost there. Here, knight a6 and rook b6. Now, something like rook a3, it looks so off. So, I remember this particular quote by Vladimir Kramnik, former world champion, and I think he said it best, is the greater the mastery, the more restrictions. What does it mean? At some moves you're not even paying attention to because they just look weird. You're not supposed to position your pieces there. So for example, in the calculation, you're not even looking at knight c7, knight a6, although it wins a pawn. Maybe there's a pawn on b2, but this knight on a6 is essentially a dead knight. It's not doing anything there. Yeah. Knight on the rim is dim. I like that. Right. And what happened in the game? Petrosian declined the queen trade. And he went on for a big and strong attack at the king side. But if you ask me about the trade, was this a good idea to play knight e4? No, I don't think so. I think Petrosian just changed the character of the game. Otherwise, he thought what I'm doing here. But I think it made more sense still try to push for the space advantage and not rush with the trade. For example, here he could have played... the question is what to do here, really. Maybe... Can I play f4? f4, knight c5, bishop f3. Okay, this is not so easy. Not so easy. So I'm pretty sure Petrosian knew a lot more than I do right now. Right? See, he definitely understood the concept of space advantage. He just saw that by trading these couple of pieces, it's going to be easier for him to stack a kingside attack, and he's definitely not going to trade queens. Yeah, he gave up some tension, but he gave up also the space advantage. Again, this is very tricky topic. Very tricky topic. When to trade, when not to trade. Right? All right, let me show you more examples. For example, about the space advantage. 5,000 moves of theory. I don't know how many thousand moves GM has to know of theory. About the other rules of trading pieces, I want to show this game. This is going to be a legendary game. This was played between Anatoly Karpov against Garry Kasparov in 1984, the very first World Championship match between these two chess legends. This was game, just a sec, this was this famous game 9. No, wait. Yeah, I think it was game 9 when Karpov was up with a 4-0 after 9 games. And one important rule about when you're trading the pieces is when you have an isolated pawn. So for example, this game, they played it out, some Tarash, and after knight c3, knight c6, bishop g5, boom, boom, they got this position. So they got this position, and normally the rule for when you have... Karpov is white. Yeah, Karpov is white. Normally the rule when you have an isolated pawn, you're playing against an isolated pawn. You want to trade as many pieces. But it's not going to be really that simple. It's not going to be that simple because, again, the rule is this. I want to trade as many pieces so that I can pressure the pawn on d5. So obviously I'm not going to take on c6. Knight takes on c6, b takes on c6. This is not what I want to do. And the same applies for black. Black doesn't want to take on d4 because after knight e4, queen d4, this is a trade which only makes your pawn on d5 so much more weaker. So both opponents are waiting for his opponent to trade, and both of them are not happy to do it themselves. And this is a very common moment. So here, Kasparov, he played h6. Now the question is, does Karpov take on f6? What do you think? And what's the reason Should he take it or should he not take it? He doesn't. Why doesn't he do it? Because Karpov played bishop g5 just to apply some pressure. He shouldn't, but he wants to trade the dark square bishops, so not against the knight. So he wants to trade these bishops and not creating additional weaknesses. He wants to play something like e3, queen d2, rook d1, and force the opponent to take on d4. So if he is going to take on f6, this means the blockade has to leave. It has to leave on d4 because e3, black is capitally taking, and bishop e6, and that's it. We have lost our outpost on d4. And the pressure on d5 is not really significant anymore. Black can simply play queen b6 and pressure the pawn on d4 itself. So of course, Karpov didn't trade it. So he went back, bishop e3, which is yet again a traditional idea. He wants to swap the knight for the bishop. He's waiting for black to take on d4 himself. Of course, Kasparov didn't do it. He played rook e8, active move, queen b3, pressuring the pawn, here, another possible offered trade. Now, knight f5. Why not bishop f4? Because the bishop on e3 very often is rerouted to d4. So again, Karpov offers a couple of trades. First, he offers Kasparov to take on f5. This is not something that Kasparov wants to do, because after bishop takes on f5, queen takes on f5. This is a lost pawn. And after d4, rook d1, this spin means that black... Yeah, Karpov was a legend. He was a true legend in terms of positional chess, understanding it, and IQP positions. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And after knight f5, he's also threatening with knight e7. It might seem an equal trade, right? I mean, what's the difference here? You're looking at this position from the black's perspective. Well, what should I do here? I mean, bishop f5, equal trade. Or allow knight e7, okay, that's an equal trade. But you have to remember, this is a fight against the d5 square, d5 pawn. And black doesn't want this bishop to be traded, because white wants to trade, play bishop d4, play rook d1, force black to take on d4, and pretty much have what he had in the game. So what happened? Of course, wait, Kasparov allowed that? That's weird. I thought he played bishop f8. Okay, he played rook c8. The question is, what happens after bishop f8? I don't know, maybe bishop f8 was... Maybe... That's strange. I could have sworn he played bishop f8. Okay, he played rook c8. I was expecting knight e7 to be played instantly. Yeah, maybe bishop d4. Alright, so bishop d4, Karpov follows the traditional idea. Here. Takes. And knight e3. And again, black cannot really push d4. Knight on e3 is very nicely positioned. This is a bad bishop. If Karpov plays knight e3, it doesn't mean he's going to trade the knight on g4. This bishop on g4 in isolated queen's pawns positions. So what's an isolated queen's pawn position, or the so-called IQP? This is an isolated queen's pawn position, pawn on d5. That's queen's pawn, so that's IQP. D4 is impossible because either of rook d1 or rook d1, other rook, and you cannot protect the queen or move it away to make this as a threat. For example, let's say d4, rook d1, something like, I don't know, knight c6 maybe. Wait, now maybe he can take it. Take an e3, something like this. And now this is a big weakness on d4. The bishop on g3 is extremely powerful. Yeah, that's a good question, of course. Why didn't he try it? But you know, when you're sitting there, you're playing with black, and Kasparov understood all of these things, and he knew why he should try to play active. But d4 is going to be much more difficult to defend than the pawn on d5. Why not b4? There's going to be intermezzo on bishop f5, and the knight is lost. Yeah. So here, by the way, yeah, white is threatening with b4 as well. So Kasparov played bishop e6 here, queen a4 here, and starting to pressure this pawn on d5. Now, Zwischenzug, Mrs. Zwischenzug. Yeah. Now, you're offered the trade. You can take on c4. Are you going to do it or not? Based from what you learned, and what you probably already knew before, most likely I'm not going to tell you anything new here. Just a reminder. So do you want to trade the knights? Again, the rule is this. You want to trade as many pieces as you can. So that the pawn on d5, yeah, you should. Because black cannot capture with a pawn. He cannot take it. There's a pin. Take. Queen a5. Here. Queen b6. Here. Rook d4, improving the position. Queen c7. Okay. Now one more final question. Should we trade queens? Should we defend it? Should we retreat it? What should we do? So this is quite a tricky topic, because if we take on c7, can we win the pawn on d5? So you have a lot of options here. Yeah, you can retreat, you can defend, you can trade. If you trade, you can win the pawn, or you can not take it. I mean, what do you do? Yeah, of course you trade. Apologize about the tricky question. Of course you trade, because again, remember the rule. You have an IQP position. You're trying from the stronger side, who is trying to block the pawn and then capture it. You're trying to trade as many pieces as possible. Normally in IQP positions, you're trying to leave your opponent with one piece absolutely. It's bishop on e6. You almost never want to trade it. You almost never want to trade it. It's a very bad piece. There might be, again, some exceptions, because I was, when we are having this position, for example, oh my goodness. Fast forward, I didn't want to show you all of that. Somebody was asking me here why it was not possible to play d4. And I said, yeah, probably because of the reason that the pawn on d4 is going to be very weak and difficult to defend. So after rook d1, knight c6. Now this would be a very interesting exception to the rule. Now this bishop on g4 now is not so bad bishop anymore, right? Because the pawn is no longer standing on d5, isn't it? So you could trade on g4, trade e3, and now play with a good bishop on g2. So this very strong bishop striking along diagonally, and maybe you can take on c6 and just take a pawn on d4. So this is where experienced player, he knows how to play with these ideas, because if you started to play spoilers, if you started to play for the space advantage, doesn't mean you're going to play for the entire game. Circumstances change all the time. All right, let me just fast forward. We had this position. Now the final question, of course, we trade queens. The final question is, do we take on d5? That's a free pawn. Somebody already said in the chat though. Nope. Why not? Yes. No. Maybe. We can try to test it. Yeah, background problems. We can try to test it. So let's say 95. I don't know which. Let's say here, here. Takes. Rook c2. Check. Here. Take. How is this a progress? But again, let me ask you a different question now. So let's say you would have this position, and for whatever reason, your opponent cannot play rook c2. Whatever. I mean, let's say the rook is not standing on c5, it's standing, I don't know where. He cannot do it. And you can keep your pawn. You can keep your pawn and go to a single rook endgame, 1 rook versus 1, 2 pawns at the queen side, 4 versus 3 at the king side. The question is, are you going to do it? It might be drawish. So, okay, I mean, probably I should show you the actual position. It's difficult to imagine this. Let's say, whatever. Let me make some random moves here. Okay, let's make this position. Now, can you take it? The d5 pawn isn't going anywhere. Don't allow the rook to be active. You know, I've seen even very good players making mistake here. Can you again remember what was your goal from the start when you got to the IQP position? Yes, you trade. You trade because what you're doing here, I mean, what is your goal? What do you want to achieve here? Is win a pawn. I mean, that is your giant goal. And if you can do it right away, I mean, why make it complicated? But I've seen many players sometimes passing this opportunity just because, oh, his opponent is going to be very active, he's going to activate his rook and blah, blah, blah. Although he is not winning the pawn back. Here, he is not winning the pawn back. So they're missing this moment. So I would take it. I would take it a heartbeat. And of course, I realized the endgame might be drawish. Nobody promised us an immediate win. But this is the best chance. We take the pawn, then try to defend everything at the queen side, even if it's going to take us to a rook endgame, 4 versus 3 at the king side, I'll go for this. Because otherwise, what we are doing here, I mean, we had this goal to win the pawn on d5. What else? What else, right? But it doesn't work here. Because black immediately recaptures the pawn with rook c2. So here, it's out of the question. And of course, Karpov didn't trade. All right, that was about the IQP position. I wanted to show you more examples. I have a next rule is normally when you're trading the pieces, you are trading bad pieces for good ones. So what's a bad piece? A bad piece is when your piece is not controlling any squares, and the good piece is shooting everywhere, left and right. For example, can a queen be a bad piece? It sure can. It can be a bad piece. It controls so little squares. Yeah, on h8, whatever. It's just doing nothing. So you might think, materially wise, this is an equal trade, right? I'm trading queen versus queen, right? It's 9 versus 9. It's okay. It's equal. It's not equal. Because if your queen is in the center, it's entirely different piece than another queen is standing somewhere else. I'm going to show you a game now from the previous sub-al. I think the author even is here. Hey, GM for Frank, are you still there? I picked your game about the trade. Probably bad memories for you, but I just wanted to show the example. Yeah, the opening doesn't really matter. A lot of trades. Here about 95, knight c6. This is not something that white normally wants to do because it only strengthens the black's pawn center. Rook c1, queen b6. All right. The first question here. Can you take on f6? And this is yet again a very popular mistake. I think I already slightly answered that. Ivanchik Aronian. No, this is just a second. Who was it? Bang Bang Drama against GM500. This is from Sab-al. This is not Ivanchik Aronian. We are playing in the Sab-al last Friday. Now, this is from one of the games. And GM500 was still here in the chat, so I was hoping he's gonna see this. Yeah, so here, yeah, I mean, I'm analyzing your game about the peace trade. So here, why bishop f6? This is a bad move. Why this is a bad move? Because it seems very easy move. I mean, I'm doubling those pawns. I'm weakening the black king. But in reality, this is a bad trade. Why this is a bad trade? Because the bishop on b2 is a very, very powerful piece. It controls a lot of squares along diagonal. It's uncontested. And by bishop takes on f6, g takes, black additionally takes control of the e5 and g5 squares as well. So when white went for this, he thought, I'm weakening my opponent's king. Yeah, but the question is, who is going to exploit it? Who is going to exploit this weak king? Yeah, good bishop for the bad knight. Exactly. This is a bad trade. And many people fall for this because they say, oh, there's a double pawn. I'm going to go for this. Double pawns is the least of important things you should be worrying about. You should be always worried about your piece activity. And white just gave his very powerful dark square bishop for nothing. These pawns on f6, they can easily be defended, and white is not capable to start an attack. There might be an exception. If white would be ready to start something immediately. Ivanchik Aronian, I won't search it now. I'll check it after the stream. It's a very similar idea, right? All right. So c takes d5. What about this trade? What about this trade? So c takes on d5. What do you think about this one? Takes. Who favors? Who favors this trade? Because again, you have to remember, every single time somebody favors from the trade. It's not automatic. It's not automatic bishop f6. It's not automatic c takes on d5. Black is very happy, but why? White is good. Black favors, white favors. Many ideas. Black is better. So again, have a look at the position. The position is opening. The position is opening. Black has two bishops. Black has a powerful dark square bishop. What does white have? The c file is completely irrelevant. So I think white already made this one mistake by taking f6. The second mistake is opening the position even more, just because he has this rook on the c file. Yeah, that was a nice position for you, exactly. So after queen c2, this was his idea. Rook c8, queen d3, here. Yeah, here he missed at some moment bishop f2. Yeah, here I think bishop f2 was possible. Let's not dwell too much on that. Queen f3, king g7, h4, h5, e4. What about this move? Are we gonna trade? Are we gonna walk by? Makes sense? You need some counterplay. I understand. I understand your thought process. But the biggest problem in this knight on d2, it's a bad knight. Although, when I'm looking from this from a normal perspective, I mean, I can just take on e4 because again this opens the position. So for example, I could even take knight e4 and bishop e7. So I'm very happy with two powerful bishops. This knight on e4, it's an active knight, but what is it doing there really? My bishops with black, I'm now speaking about black's perspective. What else? Aha, now that is a good question. What else? I think you always need to be careful. And it comes with experience, is don't rush forward. And you have to play the way that your pieces are. So if white has a knight which has no good squares, probably it makes more sense to first play something like e3, queen e2, maybe rearrange the knight, and then you can think about e4 later. Here specifically, where's the problem? Yeah, I understand that e4 activates the knight, but it doesn't. It doesn't activate, because after bishop b4, the knight is under attack. And the white has no time to take anything on d5 because the knight is hanging. So what happened in the game is for some reason he gave up the c file. Yeah, I don't really understand that. Queen d3 was a better choice. And after queen d3, it would be interesting to see how black would react here. Would he really take the pawn or not? But okay, let's not focus on that. I just wanted to show you this position. This. Now the question is, we can win a pawn. Yes, Harry Taylor. First 26 are available on YouTube. We can win a pawn. Are you seeing this? Just a second. There's a playlist with the bootcamp. You can watch them at your convenient time. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel as well. I need more followers. Piece activity. Nice. Piece activity is worse than a pawn. And you know, now this is a very huge topic. When piece activity is important more than a pawn. The knight on d2 is just a terrible piece. Yep, rook c3. Rook c3, I thought that's, for me, it's automatic. I understand maybe for somebody else it's not automatic, but the idea is obviously rook c3. And let's say if he plays queen e2, I'm not even asking for rook takes on g3 tactics, because when you're playing blitz, you can just miss that. You cannot even notice this idea of rook g3. I didn't see it myself when I was watching the game, but rook c2. Rook c2 play for activity. And rook d1 is going to be queen d4, and this is game over immediately. Extra piece is going to be enough. And after some tricks with knight c4, trade. Which piece are we going to take here? What we are going to take here? Trade with a bishop. Take on e4 with the bishop. Take on e4 with the pawn. What do we do here? Because we already have advantage We're thinking about simplifying the position. But again, when I'm having a material advantage, and this is going to be a material advantage at any moment, very often I'm thinking how not to play cheap. And this is very often when I'm playing a practical games at the GM level, how I'm not gonna play it too cheap. Is what I'm playing good enough to win? Because one pawn is still not a win. I see many ideas. Bishop e4, of course. d4, maybe d4 also works, but I think we just take the pawn. d4 works as well. But we can just take the pawn. I mean, why don't we take it? I'll simplify for you. Take with the bishop on e4 or take with the pawn. What do you think? How do you decide? Because there's going to be two conflicting rules here. Take with the bishop. Maybe there's no difference, actually. Maybe there is no difference. Yeah, the engine says there's no difference. Bishop is to simplify. That's good. I like it. But the question is, do we need to simplify? Do we need to simplify? Yeah, I understand you want to take with the bishop. When I saw this position, my first thought was take with the pawn. Why not simplify? The game is still not over. Do we need to simplify? Again, remember, the option to simplify is always there. It doesn't mean we have to do it. Yeah, bishop e4 is completely fine. It's completely fine. But the way I'm looking at this position is, what is this bishop on g2 doing? Maybe rook e1. No. You don't want to play rook e1. I like d takes on e4 because this is a terrible bishop. It completely shuts it down. And additionally, there is a bonus. I'm playing for the mate. So I'm pushing e3. Combined rook and two bishops, I might be able to make some problems for white. So for example, let's say white would play something like, e3, bishop c5, exactly. So let's say something like, let's say a4, e3, takes, here, rook e2. Now, with the bishops on the board, I think the difference is I'm still attacking. I'm still attacking because I can use this bishop e4 idea, and with the light square bishops gone, rook e2, oh, okay, rook e2, just king h3, whatever, right? It's not a big deal. Now, the major difference here is that the bishop on g6 is an attacking piece. And the bishop on g2 is a very passive piece. Bishop on g2 is striking for nothing. The bishop on g6 can target the pawns on b3 on a4 as well. With white as gm500, he played this game in a sub. I just wanted to bring it up. For me, it doesn't really matter if it's Gary Kasparov playing or somebody else. As long as we are seeing an interesting idea, I can show you. So I'm using it as an opportunity. Right, and instead here, black traded the very good bishop for a pawn. And now this is not so clear. Yeah, probably it's still winning, but this already requires some technique. So I hope you can learn something from this example. That when you have a great activity, and you, for example, you see this opportunity, that you can win a pawn. You win a pawn, and that is your goal, to win a pawn. Try to imagine yourself. Maybe there is more. There might be more. So instead of rushing forward to win a pawn, you might be winning the game in 3 moves. Think about this. Activity above all. So that was the rule about trading passive and uncompromising pieces. Oh, by the way, this is one of the secrets also used very frequently by very strong players. So a very strong player sometimes, rook c3, rook g3 is as well. I didn't even want to touch that. Yeah, there is rook g3 as well. Yeah, but it's sort of a different topic. So when an experienced player is sometimes getting into trouble against a much lesser experienced opponent, a very popular idea how, for example, GMs are frequently escaping from trouble. I call this trick selling. Selling the pawn, selling a material. What does it mean? It means I'm in trouble. Let's say I'm under a heavy attack. Endgame as well, sure. But let's say I'm under a heavy attack. And probably I'll get mated. So what I do, I offer a pawn. So offer a pawn. There you go. You can take a pawn. Or let's say an exchange for a pawn maybe. And the opponent happily takes it because he thinks a pawn or exchange is going to be enough. I trade queens. Now I'm not losing anymore. And after a long game, I can even try to trick my opponent and win this. So this is the so-called I sell you this pawn. So for example here, I don't think why I did it on purpose. But I think this would qualify. If I could do this on purpose, I'm in trouble. So I'm selling you this pawn on e4. So please take it. I'm going to be so much more fine here. After rook c3, it looks terrible. Just remember this. Yeah, probably would need to show you some examples. I don't think I have one ready about that one. Right. The next one. Yeah, always. The next rule is always evaluate. Yep. Okay, pretty much like that. I don't think that was intentional though, so this is probably a bad example. But that's the idea. That's the idea anyway. If I could do this on purpose, I'm already in a deep trouble. So I would try to sell you. Here you go. Take the pawn. Take the pawn. And you're not asking yourself why my opponent is doing this. Maybe he is in a deeper trouble. So he's just giving you the pawn so that he's not getting mated. The main things to evaluate. Oh, there's a lot of things. King safety, control of the squares, piece activity, control of the open files. So for example here, how do I establish that black is better? Black has very powerful bishops. Black has an open c file. Black has a center. So white has a very bad knight on d2. I think it should be already enough to say that black is probably already almost winning here, because these slight little advantages, they combine together. Yeah, it happens intuitively at the intuition level at some point. All right, let me show you the next example. Evaluate about going to endgame, which pieces to trade and which not. And I want to show you this example. Just a second. Yeah, GM500 lost the game. It's not really that important. I wanted to show this example, right? That knowing how to properly trade pieces is extremely important. And experienced players against lesser experienced players, they use it against you all the time. Okay, this is opening game is not so important. I managed to formulate an IQP, and there we go. Trade a lot of pieces, as many as we can. We are trying to trade as many pieces as we can and block the pawn on d5, on d4. Trade. Bishop g4. Okay, now the first question. Thank you, study lines. Now the next question is, what do you trade? So, from what we know is, oh, my opponent wants to trade the bishop for the knight. The position is open. I probably should be quite happy about it. So, if I understood it correctly, I might play h3 because he has this bishop, and this bishop is normally a stronger piece. Now, what about the pawn structure here? What do you remember from the IQP? isolated queen's pawn structure I mentioned a couple of examples ago. Karpov against Kasparov. Silence. Everybody's thinking. Keep the pawn blocked, alright, but which piece is to trade? Do you remember that? Which piece is to trade? This is very important. All light pieces? Yeah, have at least one knight, Alki. Yeah, have at least one knight on d4. And remember, we don't ever want to trade this terrible bishop. Never. It's one of the worst pieces in the position. So what we do automatically? Knight e4. We go for the blockade. Yeah, it's a lot worse. It's a lot worse. This knight on d4 is automatic. So if you would be thinking about what's the difference between knight e4 or knight e4, there you go. You already see the difference. He's going to trade the bishop. So, all right, let's trade. Takes, takes. Okay, he decided he needs to take. I'm not so sure he had to take. You would have played knight e5? No, I mean, we have to block the pawn. We have to block the pawn. This is a very nice blockade on d4. Trade here. And now is going to be the most difficult question probably. What are we going to trade here? There's an open e file. One rook? Not two. How many rooks are we going to trade? One rook? Two rooks? Maybe not two? Why not? Rook a to e1. It's an automatic move, right? Yeah, you want to play rook a to e1 automatically. Just because there's an e file. Always trade one. I see you have some good understanding there. Both rooks? No. No. No, you don't want to trade both rooks. The reason is very simple. I'll show you what happens if you go for the automatic rook trade. This applies not only for the IQP positions, but for endgames in general. When you are the stronger side in an endgame, try to have at least one rook always on the board. You can always trade it if you want to. You can trade it later if you cannot find anything else. You're going to need this rook. I mean, okay, not always trade one, but you don't mind to trade one, but you absolutely mind to trade two. So I'm going to show you why. So for example, rook e1 is automatic. Trade, trade, and let's say rook e8. Yeah, rook e8, takes, takes. Let's say we play something normal. And king f2, here, here, here. Whatever. I just played some normal moves. Whatever. How you are gonna win this? You're missing pieces. Yeah, so you have this very wonderful outpost on d4. Yeah, you could even position the king on d4, the knight on maybe f4, and try to play g4, g5, try to get to this pawn. This is extremely difficult. Extremely difficult. You're missing one rook. So we are already recognizing this position that, yeah, without rooks, that's good. I like it. Yeah, principle of two weaknesses. There's no two weaknesses yet. There's just one. Unless, of course, you're calculating your opponent to be the second weakness. I know some people who are treating the position like that. Or the opponent. Opponent is one big giant weakness. So you already have one and he's the second one. But okay, jokes aside. Yep, rook is needed. Rook is definitely needed. So trade and fight for the space advantage. And again, remember the rule is we don't want to trade the sad light square bishop for black. Yeah, so f3, fighting for space advantage, fighting for e4 square. And here I think the best try was to play bishop h5. Again, now the question is, what are you gonna do against the bishop g6 threat? So black plays bishop g6. It's not like your opponent plays bishop h5. You're so much concentrated in your ideas. I mean, you want to do a lot of damage there at the queen side, and then suddenly comes bishop g6. You're like, oh, bishop g6. I didn't expect that. I mean, what did you expect, really? So black played bishop h5 with the idea to play bishop g6. It's quite logical. So always pay attention to what your opponent is planning. Hey, Lashant. c3. I don't really think the actual move really order matters here. c3 or rook d1, whatever. Just don't trade. Don't trade it. This is a terrible bishop. So, for example, yeah, rook d1, bishop g6. I like this idea of bishop b5. That's a lovely idea. Bishop b5, bishop a4, bishop b3, c3, and pressure this pawn. And g4, h4, either g5 or h5. Try to win the pawn on d5. Principle of two weaknesses is difficult without rooks. It's very simple, because there's no second weakness. How do you create one? You need a rook. For example, here, let's say I have this position, and we are trading the second rook as well, right? Rook e1, trade, trade. So one weakness is on d5. How do you create a second weakness? How? I mean, maybe your opponent is going to help you. Yeah, sure, maybe he's going to push a5, a4 just to prove some kind of a point. But most likely, he's not going to do it. We already had a tournament, Leshant. It's finished. It's finished. It's over. We started with a tournament, and now we are having a bootcamp. So, now check my schedule. I sort of warned everybody. So what happened? Yeah, what happens is, of course, we don't want to trade rooks. Fighting for space advantage, keeping the rooks on the board, and trying to get to the pawn on d5. I managed to win the game. Yeah, it was incredibly difficult to win the game. And I was using the rook. Trying to make more weaknesses at the queen side. At some moment, I just completely misplayed it. My opponent was very close to a draw, but this is the right approach. Just one weakness is not enough. My opponent was quite skilled, almost international master, so he wasn't easily allowing my ideas to happen. But this is why you use the second rook to create more weaknesses. All right. And right. Now I'll show you maybe a couple of interesting other games about good trades. Just a second, let me find one. Okay, I'll start with this endgame. Just a second. Let me find it. Now, black has a pawn. Black has a pawn. Now the question is, what do we want to trade? Or do we want to trade? So I would ask, are you happy trading rooks? Are you happy trading bishops? Are you happy trading the A pawn for the B pawn? Of course, let's not blunder the mate in one on rook d8. That's not the point. But I think it's very important. Let's say you are reaching an endgame. You're asking yourself these questions. Am I happy to trade? Because it's never random. There's always a reason why we're doing this. So here black plays g6 to stop the mate, bishop d5. Question number one. Trade? Toss coin? What do you do? It contradicts what Dvoretsky said. I think I already mentioned. The stronger side is interested trading pieces. I said that. Dvoretsky said that. Does it mean this rule always applies? No. This is why it's tricky. Don't trade. Yeah, but the question is, I would like to hear an answer now. Why? Why don't you want to trade? Without, okay, you might be guessing the right answer. Yeah, of course, you don't want to trade. But why? So Dvoretsky can be wrong. I'm pretty sure Dvoretsky knew that the rule doesn't always apply. Why don't you want to trade? Maybe it's winning. Maybe it's not. So the rule is always simple. Never trade if you're not sure. That's it. That's it. So it always applies for positions where you are the dominating side. I'm the dominating side here. Am I absolutely sure if this is winning? It's not random. So takes. Sure, if I manage to trade both bishops and rooks, okay, this is a winning pawn endgame. Nobody's arguing about that. Sure, I agree. But I don't think it's going to happen. Your opponent is not going to allow that. So I'm thinking, okay, if I'm going to trade the bishops here, let's say I'm trading because Dvoretsky said I'm supposed to simplify, right? And this is easier, not going to blunder anything. So let's say I'm pushing something like here, let's say, I don't know what to do here really. Something like f5, b4, and probably we are going to trade these pawns. Are you sure this is a winning rook endgame? I'm not. Yeah, probably the king is cut off on the first rank, but I'm not sure. And it's always like that. It's always like that. And you're not sure. Is this going to be enough for you to win? Not sure. I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm not Nostradamus. I don't know what's going to happen. The second is, for example, yeah, bishop g4. Let's say, are we going to trade rooks? We can play bishop f5, rook b2, and force the rook trade. Can we do it? Dvoretsky said we have to simplify. Let's check this out. So let's say bishop f5, something like king g1, rook b2, whatever, I don't know, bishop c4, rook b1, takes, and b4. Can we win this? Yeah, extra pawn should be good. It's very easy to misplay this. For example, let's say I push it here. Very fast forwarding. Fast forwarding. Is this going to be enough? To be honest, this already looks like an easy draw. King goes here. I sacrifice the bishop for this pawn. Whoops. Wrong corner. Okay, you might have not seen it from afar, but again, you're not sure. You're not sure about this. So the rule is this. You are at least trying to follow this rule, is you don't trade if you're not sure. The rook is very active. The bishop is very active. So keep this opportunity for later. Keep pushing. Yeah, keep pushing. I mean, you can trade whenever you want. So this is what happened. Yeah, of course, not trade didn't happen. So bishop g4, here, pushing for the mate. We don't want to trade the pawns. Don't want to trade the pawns. Again, the same. Don't trade if you're not sure. Again, trade. We can take on b4, we can take on a6, trade even the bishops because it's going to be easier for us. But you're also making it easier for your opponent. Listen, guys, I mean, it's not important what happened there. I just want to fast forward to this position, explain the concept of trading the pieces. There was no mate. There was no mate, if you're asking, Akim. We don't trade. Don't trade. Push forward. And what I found it quite interesting is that here you can concentrate on pushing the f-pawn. You have a rook, you have a bishop, and you have two weaknesses, so to speak, at the same time. So one weakness, it's not really that obvious, is the f-pawn. Your opponent needs to take care of this. The second weakness is the pawn on b4. You can also simultaneously target the pawn on b4 by not allowing the trading the pawn on a6. No, I didn't play against Daniel. I was running Arena. I would love to. I think I'll write to him and offer him to play a match or something. That would be fun. You know he challenged me, yeah. He did it actually twice. I would love to play, but it was the wrong moment. Right, so we're pushing the pawn forward. And an interesting moment arises here. And even with limited material, we can play for the checkmate. Yeah, it's very weak. Rook d7. Now this is impossible. Here and here. And suddenly the white king is cut off. So the king is cut off. Here, here. We're playing for the checkmate, and we're doing two things at the same time. We're playing for the checkmate, and we're going for the b-pawn. So we have two weaknesses. So opponent cannot guard them both at the same time. Again, the question here. Can we trade? Can we take on b4? Can we allow the rook trade? Are we sure this is going to be a winning position for us? Not 100% sure. Right? So I think it's fair to continue. Keep this pawn on b4 as a weakness. And we still continue to play for the mate. And that's it. That's it. And the game finished very quickly. Now finally I could take. And there is no stalemate. That's it. So again, what we can learn from this game is never trade, especially in endgames when you're not sure, because that's the rule of chess. You trade something, you cannot put it back. You trade rooks, you cannot put it back. You trade bishops, you cannot put them back, especially the pawns as well. You're going to miss it, you're going to regret it. And I think this is something that you can use yourself when you are the stronger side. You are the one who is pushing for the win, and your opponent is like, okay, I'm waiting here. I have no active counter chances whatsoever, so I'm relying on a passive defense. So, for example, this position. Yeah. This position. What kind of active defense here white could have potentially? There is none. There's no active defense. He would love to trade the a-pawn for the b-pawn. He would love to trade the bishop and somehow try to escape into rook endgame. And this is again the moment when very good opponents like GMs, they trick lesser experienced players. So for example, let's say I'm having this position with white. I'm playing against a youngster. And the youngster has studied a lot of theory, he knows how to calculate well, but he doesn't know much about endgames. So, obviously, I'm going to try to play bishop d5. And again, he understands that trading pieces should be good. And we go into the rook endgame. And then, presumably, I somehow manage to trade the pawn for the pawn. And escape in a rook endgame. That's very traditional. Right. All right. Maybe one more final example I would like to show you. Very quick. From the highest level is a game between Magnus Carlsen against Ding Liren. There's obviously a lot of examples. They played this game. Which year was it again? Oh, last year. One of the online super tournaments. I'm not watching them really. There's so many. Skilling Open, Meltway. I mean, it's fun, but I'm not watching all of them, of course. Sometimes I'm watching the final. For example, I was watching how Wesley was playing against Magnus in this Opera final, couple of games, but not so many really. So this game was played between Magnus Carlsen, Hai Yahav, against Dingler, pretty much two best players in the world. There's also Wesley, so there's Fabiano Caruana, but I would say Dingler is in top 5, definitely. And they played out at London. Yeah, Carlsen is notorious for playing London opening. So without the theoretical knowledge, without knowing nothing, of course this is theory. Do you trade? Do you defend? Or do you retreat? Of course it doesn't really hurt to know some knowledge, opening knowledge here. You go to g3. Why? How do you make this decision? How do you make this decision? Is it bishop g3, bishop d6? How do you make this? Yeah, Levy is fun, isn't he? Super fun. Retreat. Hey, GM Shrisha. You know, there's pretty much every single move possible. But everyone, every single of them comes with a specific idea. Yeah, bishop g3 is completely fine. I think the only thing I don't want to do here is trading on d6. This is what I don't want to do. Because after trade, let's say knight d2, short castle, bishop d3, knight c6 or knight d6, maybe knight d7 is more accurate, and black pushes e5. We lose control of the e5 square. If we retreat bishop g6, yeah, the question is how is that really relevant, really different? Because black could play, I think that was even theory here, queen c7. I hope I won't really invent a bicycle here. Knight d7, bishop d3, and was it e5? Okay, not e5 immediately, then it was short castle and e5 immediately. So it's a fight for the e5 square. So what Carlsen played? He played bishop d3. Yeah, engine doesn't like it. I just want to explain the concept. It's fighting for the e5 and d4 square. Take, take. Queen b6. Very logical. Attacking the pawns. Now, first choice. Where do we position a queen? Queen b3, queen c2, queen e2, queen c1. What do we do here? Queen a4, yeah, queen a4, bishop d7. So essentially I think it's a difference between queen b3 and something like queen e2 or queen c2. I don't think it really matters. The question is, do you trade queens? Should you? Is it worth it? Queen b3? No? Remember, you don't have to trade pieces just because you can. You don't have to. Queen b3 is fine move. Queen, what? No b4, no. There's no queen b4. a4. Okay, I see many ideas. I think it's very interesting for white to keep the queens on the board because we are still relying on a possible attack. We have a very good bishop against a bad bishop on c8, and if black is gonna castle, we could potentially start an attack. I mean, we can always trade queens if we want to. That's the way I would treat it. Yeah, so it's either queen e2 or queen c2. I don't know which is better. I would play queen e2 myself. Okay, I mean, Carlsen played queen c2. Take. Next question. Both Ace Gambit. Although Magnus has played some Both Ace Gambit, you probably don't believe me. But that was a mouse slip. Why not pawn b3? Because it weakens some squares. Pawn b3, yeah, I don't like it. Now, take it with the pawn or take with the knight? Well, how do you decide with which to take? And there's going to be a couple of trades. I just want to show this game because I just love it from the strategical point of view. Pawn gives IQP. For who? For black. And this is tricky. C-Dex. Difficult questions about choosing opening. Take with the knight. That's nice, Matt Kongs. I like that. Take with the knight. Not only not to create a weakness, you have an outpost on d4. If you practice testosterone matter, then you're definitely gonna get better. Either against AlphaZero, Stockfish, or human beings. As long as you're practicing, you're getting better. So knight takes on d4. We are keeping our pawn structure intact, and this is an outpost. Next question. What happens here after knight c6? Do you trade? Do you defend? Do you move away the knight? There's a number of moves. We can take on c6. We can play bishop b5. We can play knight b3. We can play short castle. We can play knight f3, sack the pawn. But didn't we just discard the idea of having an IQP? Move it back. I like that. Trade not to destroy the pawn sheet. Yeah, bishop e5 is you're reacting to the problem. Knight c6 b takes is a bad choice because we're strengthening our opponent's center. We're opening the b file. He'll activate the rook and he'll play c5. We don't want to play some cheap tricks. For example, this is a typical mistake. For example, queen d2, like, oh, make a poker face. I just blundered the pawn on d4, right? And praying that your opponent is going to take on d4 and boom, you're going to be very proud. Yeah, that your opponent just blundered it. But this is a cheapo. It has nothing to do with strategy. Because if your opponent is going to play something simple like bishop d7, bishop b5. Now, the question is, why do you create this weakness on d4? Not good. So we don't want to allow the trade. We don't want to take on c6. Bishop b5 doesn't help us. Bishop b5 is bishop d7. How does it help us? It's going to force us to take on c6. So it's only move. Knight f3. We are keeping the control of the e5 and d4 square. And this is a bare bishop. So the game continued. Short castle, bishop d7, knight d2, rook c8, threatening with knight b4, a3, here, 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 and knight e5. Knight e5 was presumably not the best move, but okay. Now the question for black. What does black do? d4 for black. There was no d4 for black. This is the best. Yeah, this is the best. They play the best chess so far. Magnus Carlsen plays with white. Dinglevrend is playing with black. So the question for black. What do? Trade? Not? Coin? He takes. Cry. Somebody can cry as well. d4. No. Knight h5. Yeah, what is the knight doing there? G3 and it goes back. Move the knight to play f6. That's a lot of weaknesses on h7 and g6. Not good. Essentially, the question is, do you trade or you don't trade? That's it. How do you decide? Based on what? Because, again, having a single piece less, it's maybe easier. Big adventure. Trade. Dingleran took. That's a mistake. He took it. You don't take it. No trade. You ignore it. The best move was knight e7 with the idea to play bishop b5. You ignore the knight on e5 for the time being. It's not doing much there. It's a nice knight. But the biggest problem in black's position is this bishop. With this bishop, light square bishop on d3, white can start a good attack at the king side. Like rook e3, maybe g4, rook g3, and the queen and bishop battery can create a lot of trouble for black. So Dingleran took it. He took it and he played knight e8. And his idea, he had a good idea. He thought, I'm going to play now bishop b5 next. But again, guys, this was a rapid game. In a classical game, I'm pretty sure that Dingleran wouldn't make such a mistake. So his idea is to play bishop b5, trade off this bishop. The white knight was heading to d4. Now what? I think Dingleran, when he saw this position, his idea was, okay, he sees obviously there's some attack at the king side, but he has an easy game at the queen side, should be okay. Maybe slightly worse, should be okay. So white is not interested to trade. Bishop h7. Check it out later. It seems, wait, this is dangerous. Yeah, either black would play g6, the bishop is under attack, but check it out. Check it out. a4. Where do you position the bishop? Because the bishop goes back. We position the bishop back on d3. So we don't make this trade. We keep the bishop, the light square bishop, and chances for a potential kingside attack. Let's say bishop c6. I could play bishop d3. I could play knight e4, f4, queen f2, f5, and very strong attack. This bishop on c6 and knight on e8, they're just dead pieces. They're not doing anything. So what Dingleran did? He played bishop a6, waiting for the bishop to come back to d3, because this is what he wants. Now what do you think Carlsen played here? Because black now is threatening. b4, bishop c4, I don't see how it really helps. a5, a5, queen goes away. Knight d4, knight d4 is actually interesting. Yeah, but you need to understand there's also this g6 problem. I think knight d4 actually is the strongest move here. Yeah, I'm a bit surprised that Carlsen didn't go for this. Yeah, I guess then I'm waiting for you, not for the best move. No, knight h4, no. He played queen b1. With the idea to retreat with the bishop. So bishop c2 is the positional threat, and the bishop in a6 is dead. So it almost forces Dingleran to play g6. And after the trade, queen g6. Here. Carlsen trade queens and got 4 pawns for the piece. And the bishop on a6 is completely out of the game. He just crushed Dingleran from here on. So the idea, again, this was interesting. So normally when somebody sacrifices a piece on g6, you're aiming for a mate. But again, it's very interesting and important to understand that you are not always sacrificing to mate. I mean, do you have even pieces to mate here? Just a queen and a knight. I mean, how do you mate? So you sacrifice a piece in order to win 3 pawns. Now you force a trade, simplify the position, take the knight on e6, and after knight e4, these pawns, they are deciding the game. Yeah, this is quite an amazing concept from Carlsen, but again, all of this wouldn't have been possible had Dingleren not taken the knight on e5. So knight e7 was more accurate. I think he missed the entire sequence. So he played knight e8. He sure understood the consequences of this very powerful pieces. Bishop b5 was his idea, and this is why Carlsen played bishop h7 and queen a4 first, and queen b1 not to allow it. But if you're asking me, was knight e4 possible here? Yeah, probably it was. Maybe it was even better. But knight d4 is not forcing black to play g6. Now that's the difference. After a4, bishop a6, queen b1. Now this g6 almost feels like it has to be played, because again, if I play something like knight c7, bishop goes back. I don't know what I'm doing here. Here, f4, it's a free attack. And black is completely paralyzed. Its pieces are not participating in the game, and white is just attacking at the king set. Yeah, thank you, Janko. Right, all right. I still have some examples, but I'm not going to show them. It's really quite late. So this was the final example of the 27 bootcamp, how to trade pieces. Of course, I don't pretend I explain you everything. Again, let me remind you the topics. I mean, when do you trade? You trade pieces. When you have material advantage, you simplify, but you remain patient. One of the most important rules by trading when you're attacking is you're removing a critical defender to the defending side. Then there's the space advantage rules, that the stronger side normally doesn't want to trade pieces because your opponent is cramped, he has no space, and this rule works vice versa as well. So if you are completely cramped, you're lacking space, you're looking for ways to trade off some pieces and thus give room for other pieces as well. And finally, there's the isolated queen's pawn strategy, IQP. And in the IQP setups, you are trading pieces and trying to capitalize on the isolated pawns structure. Then there's the about which pieces to normally trade, and you are trying to trade bad pieces which have no squares, which have no future, against good squares which control a lot of squares around, and vice versa. You don't trade very good pieces with very active range of abilities against pieces which are not doing anything. And I think I mentioned this. Queens can also be bad pieces. They're not controlling anything. So think about this. When you can trade off the queens or trade off some rooks, who is benefiting from this trade? Is it you or your opponent? And this is extremely tricky when, for example, you're winning something in the process. So, for example, you're winning a pawn, and I'm trading off a very bad piece for my opponent. I showed this game by GM500. Are you sure this is going to be enough? Are you sure you're not playing too cheap by making a very bad trade by just winning us insignificant material advantage? Something to think about. Right, always evaluate the consequences when trading into endgame. Don't trade too many pieces. For example, I show you this endgame. Try to keep always a rook in an endgame. When you are playing from the dominating side, you might need it to create a second weakness. But finally, when you're in time trouble and you are having a great position, remember, the more pieces you trade, the less possibility for you it's to blunder.